Game of Thrones perplexingly ended with the crowning of Bran the Broken as the new King of Westeros at the urging of Tyrion, a war criminal who's for some reason being allowed to suggest who should be the next King of Westeros. Okay. But logic, who needs that? That's for suckers. Hey, look, there's Podrick being a Kingsguard now for some reason. God, who's so stupid. Not to mention Bran the Broken, what a horrifically offensive name for our disabled character here, okay? With all that said, though, I do get asked on a regular basis whether I do think that Bran will eventually be the king at the end of the series, and I will say, while I argue against many elements of that finale, I do think that Bran being the king might be the one of the few things that is for sure probably about to happen. Yeah, kinda. But even though this is a Bran video and you want to skip a Bran chapter, please don't scroll away. I can explain why I think this. Also, don't skip the Bran chapters. They're fucking good, you weirdos. So yes, I do think this is going to happen, namely because George basically told us that he told them that that is specifically something that's going to happen. But before you get all sad, I would also say that the how it happens, I think, is very different in the show than how it would be in the books. Because the show made some bizarre choices with Bran that are what I think lead to this being such a nonsense choice. So allow me to, break down what George said and then break down why I think this won't be as crazy in what he sets up. So while the line between the events of the finale and what George told them is blurry most of the time, because we know he told them a bunch of stuff, but how they used it, what they picked and actually included is unclear. We do know that George gave them what he called 3 oh shit moments. And for a while we knew what the first 2 were, but we didn't know what the third one was. So the first one was Shireen Baratheon being, enfuegoed by Melisandre on a pyre, per Stannis' orders, yada yada. Unpleasant, but yes, that is one of them. Though again, the how, the where, the what of it all, we are unclear. We just know that fact. So don't come for me and be like, oh yeah, it's just like the show. It's not. And then the other one was Hodor. Hodor and Hold the Door. Some version of that is an oh shit moment that George told them, so we kind of know a version of that is going to happen in the book. And so after the conclusion of the series, some of the people who were told these 3 oh shit moments stated that the third one was that Bran would become king. And if you don't believe that, you can find a quote from George online where he specifically says, of course I didn't want to say who would end up on the throne at the end, but, because they were catching up, I had to tell them. I didn't want to tell them that it was Bran. He says it in a quote. You can find this online. So when people want to yell oh, everything in the finale is true, Dany's mad, Jon goes and, lives on the other side of the wall for some reason, oh, it's all true. No, we only know for certain a few very specific things, and I just told you what they were, so chill. And while I get the frustration at the whole Bran becoming king thing, I will say, I think we really need to remember, as I mentioned with those other oh shit moments, we are missing the context of the how George is going to do it. And if you've read the books, you know that he sets things up better than the show typically does. So if this is happening, I think if we give him the benefit of the doubt, it's going to happen in a more, logical way. And I think a lot of the negative feelings that people get come from the way that the show characterized Bran as the show went on, which, in my opinion, differs pretty solidly from what we get in the books. And sure, the books cut off at a certain point, but where we leave off in them, Bran has just had this enlightening moment where he has tapped into his Greenseer abilities. He's been taught how to skin change into the weirwood tree so that he can have these visions of the past. And in the show, they purport that, from that moment forward, he's different, he's changed, he's not Bran anymore, he's the three-eyed Graven. I'm okay, but that's not how he acts though. So what are you doing? And to be clear, I am not blaming the actor. I am certain that because the text also reinforces the choices that are being made here, that he's been directed to act this way. He seems like a doll. But Bran stops being a character at that point. He is turned into this, just blank, just omniscient character thing. It's it's character adjacent, but it's not really a character. He's just the all-seeing eye, but who doesn't care about anything. Because everything is like this, and I'm the three-eyed raven now. I've seen it, all the things we do for love. What? Why are you making him act like that, y'all? Stop! And as I read the text, I think what, in my opinion, is happening is they are taking the characterization of Brynden Rivers, the three-eyed crow, who is growing into the tree here, and then trying to give it to Bran as they, expand the story past the point of where there's source material. But the problem with that is that, I don't think Brynden Rivers' Bloodraven is acting like that because of his Greenseer abilities. I think he's acting like that because he's 150 fucking years old and growing into a tree. And even at that point, the guy, the ancient man growing into tree, Bloodraven, he still has a bit of a personality. He's just slower because he's ancient and growing into a tree. Which Bran, correct me if I'm wrong, is not at this moment. And so what the show seems to be implying is that when you tap into your, Greenseer abilities, you are changed, you are forever altered. But that seems to be somewhat at odds with what we know about Bloodraven. Because Bloodraven, Brynden Rivers, was the hand of the king for 2 to 3 kings, and ran that country. He ran it like a ship. And just a very harsh ship, let's be clear. But he was able to do that, pretty clearly because of his, northern skin-changing abilities, and I'm assuming his Greenseer abilities as well. Unless we're meant to believe that he didn't tap into those despite being, all into the arcane shit until until he was already, exiled and beyond the wall and then was growing into a tree. Really? And so I don't think so. I don't think you just tap into your Greenseer abilities and then you become weird zombie child, because that doesn't make sense with the context of what that ability actually is. Because the show seems to frame it as this, almost like Paul Atreides thing, where you have you've assumed all the knowledge of the universe in yourself and now you're this weird thing. But that's not really what it is. The Greenseer ability and the skin changing into the weirwood is it's a skill. It's not you're not retaining the knowledge, you have the ability to access it. For anyone who wants to argue and be no, it should be the other way because, when Paul Atreides got it, it changes him as a person. Okay, cool, but I don't know where everyone got into their heads that George is this big Dune fan. He's not. You can Google it. He thinks the first one and even the second one are fine, but they are not really his cup of tea. So this whole idea that A Song of Ice and Fire is his send-up of Dune is this weird take that I keep seeing in my comments under lots of characters, Bran, Daenerys, etc. So stop it, it's not a thing. But my assumption is the showrunners kind of just had that as a reference point, which is why we get the weird characterization. So I think it's less that, tapping into your Greenseer abilities changes your personality, and just more you have another skill set, a skill set which I think, ultimately could be helpful for a king to have. A king who is able to look to the past when making a decision, I think, is a helpful thing. I think it's what ultimately allowed Brynden Rivers, even though he wasn't the king, but as hand of the king, to be as effective as he was. And we know from the Westerosi historical perspective that Greenseer kings were a big thing with the Children of the Forest, or no, actually no, I think it was the First Men. Or no, Children of the Forest? I can't remember. It's one of them. Someone tell me in the comments. I forget things, but you're still here, okay? I'm not perfect. The Greenseer kings were a thing, and they were considered very powerful and very important in protecting their people. When we had the again, I'm forgetting if it was the First Men invasion or the Andal invasion. It was the Greenseer kings who got together and were working these magics to rid the men. So maybe it was Children of the Forest then. Regardless, there's historical context in the universe for this sort of thing, but the show's characterization of his personality, I think, is just a weird direction that they took it in. And if you take that out, think about how this fits in the context of what George is trying to say about monarchy. And that's that monarchy kind of sucks. So the idea that they do want to do away with hereditary monarchy, where you just have to kind of hope that the next person in line is decent, this makes a little more sense. Greenseers have the ability to access the past, to reference history, and then make decisions based off of that. And then Bran, whether because he can't father a child or whatever, isn't going to reproduce and have more kids. And so maybe whoever comes next will be another Greenseer? Is that the idea? I don't know. Again, I don't have all the answers because obviously I'm not George, but like I think you can see that there are enough like pieces here that he can make something that like logically makes sense without going down the weird directions that the show went. Okay, goodbye.